In this video I'm going to be working on a very simple bench dog system for my workbench. I've never used a bench dog system before, so I'm not entirely sure that this is going to work out for me. What I currently tend to do is simply to put a bar clamp into my vise, and that's always worked well for me, but I think a bench dog system might help to speed up my workflow. So it's just something that I want to try out. Let's get started. I've got a small offcut of oak. This is about 33mm square, and I just found this in my scrap bin, and this is what I'm going to use for the dog. I've picked this back left-hand corner of my workbench to install the dog for three reasons. Firstly, I think it will be in a nice position for me to plane. Secondly, because this is at the back of the workbench, this area doesn't tend to get as much use as the rest of the work surface. And thirdly, I have easy access to the underside of the worktop, and the reason for that will become apparent later. So the first job is to drill out a hole for the dog, and I've got a 30mm Forstner bit which I'm going to use to get me started. So I think I'm going to put it about here. We are through. So now I want to take out the rest of the material, so I'm just going to try and centre this to the hole as best I can and draw around it. Now I'm going to use a regular drill bit to take out some more of the material. And now I can chisel out the rest of the material. Now if you wanted to do this quicker, you could use an oscillating tool, but you'd need to use a slightly bigger dog than the one I'm using, because the blades are about the same width as the hole I'm making, and because this moves left to right, I think this would give me too wide a cut. Time to try this out for size. Looks like I need to take a little bit off this side. Okay, it's very close now. It will go in if it's forced, but I don't want it to be that tight. But it's just occurred to me that it will be easier just to adjust the size of my dog rather than the hole itself. And I'll do that on the belt sander. And now I've got a nice snug fit, and I can feel from underneath the worktop that it goes in far enough for the bottom to be flush with the underside of the workbench, which is what I wanted. I've cut an offcut of plywood. This is 12mm, but it doesn't really matter. And I'm going to mount this so that it covers half of the hole. And I'm just going to use wood glue and brad nails for this. And I'm just sighting down the hole to try and get this positioned so it's roughly halfway, and that looks good about there. Next I'm going to insert the dog so it's properly seated against the plywood, and I'll make a pencil mark on the bottom of the dog, and I'm also going to make a scribble. And what I want to do is cut away about 5mm at the bottom of the dog. So all of the shaded area I need to remove. I'm going to use the bandsaw for this, but you could quite easily just use a handsaw. So now I'm going to insert this so that this piece protrudes beyond the surface of the plywood. And now I'm going to make a mark around the dog. And now I'll cut all the way through the material. And now I can put the dog in, make sure that it's properly seated against the plywood, and I'm going to use a block plane to plane the top of the dog flush with the work surface. And this is oak end grain, so
it's not the easiest thing to plane. And that feels nice and flush now. So now the way that this works is when I don't need the dog, I can install it and just continue to use the surface of my workbench as I would normally. And when I need a dog, I can push it up from underneath, rotate it, push it back in, and then I can butt up my piece of wood against it and use the plane. And that's the dog basically done, but I am going to take this a further step because I want to add a protective seal to the end grain of this plywood. So I'm going to mask off the area, and I'm going to apply a couple of coats of this matte black spray paint which I bought from a pound shop.
I also painted the top of the dog. And because the first one was a success, I later added a second dog. And this will be useful for working on wider boards. This bench dog system worked out a lot better than I thought it would, and I definitely think that I'm going to be using this quite a lot going forward. It's really simple but effective, and I think it took me around 2 hours to get this project completed. Not bad. Thanks for watching.